Warning, these stories are told by grown-ups for an audience of grown-ups and may feature adult situations, so we've tried to take care to bleep any words that you might find offensive, but parents may want to watch the stories first and decide if they're appropriate for children. Finally, the views expressed in these stories are those of the storytellers alone and may not reflect the opinions or attitudes of Blue Ridge PBS or Echo TV. And now, enjoy the show.
Angeline the baker lived on the village green. The way I always loved her beats all you've ever seen. Angeline the baker, Angeline, I know I should have married Angeline just 20 years ago. Her husband was a butcher, his name was Uncle Sam. I never shall forget her, no matter where I am. Angeline the baker, Angeline, I know I should have married Angeline just 20 years ago. Angeline, a brand new dress was neither black nor brown. It was the color of stormy skies before the rain came down. Angeline the baker, Angeline, I know I should have married Angeline just 20 years ago. Horses in my pack, the leader, he was blind. I dreamed that she was dying, yes, I saw my Angeline. Angeline the baker, Angeline, I know I should have married Angeline just 20 years ago.
The Laurel Hells Ramblers. We're going to hear from them another couple times tonight. So I put up a Facebook post as I'm thinking about this show, and I do this so often, and I like click my heels, and I'm like, okay, can we get like a hillbilly goth, awesome, gorgeous kind of band to play? Does that exist? And then boom, those beautiful people are here with us tonight. I love them. And they're going to have some merch out in the lobby. I feel positive that we are going to be able to say we knew them when, because they're incredible. So look forward to hearing from them again. Welcome to Hoot and Holler, y'all. At about 3:30, I was at Spirit Halloween, like having an absolute meltdown about my outfit. And thank you. And, I wanted to just do the spook thing, and I wanted to do it up, and I'm looking at these long black wigs and red streaks, and anyway, I just went back to my own dang closet and got some stuff out of the garbage bag, so here we are. Anyway, I am so thrilled. I've been waiting for this night for literally months now, which you would think I had picked out my outfit before that, but I didn't. So what more perfect room could we be hosting this event in than the luscious and very haunted Grandin Theatre? There's nowhere else that we should be tonight. So thank you to the Grandin staff and volunteers who always treat us like royalty. Patrick and James and Ian and everybody out there, thank you, thank you, thank you. We have, and then I also want to thank Sam Lunsford, our DJ. Blue Ridge PBS Echo is here, who does us these wonderful favors by coming to film these shows, and then they show them on their channel and then on their YouTube channel, and then anybody in the world can watch. And so we're so grateful for that, and they can always use new subscribers, monetary donations. It's PBS, y'all. We got to keep them alive. So please, by all means, ask Sadie or Jay, and let's keep these guys alive, because it's a beautiful thing, and we appreciate them being here too. Okay, now I'm going to go into my woo-woo. Like I do. Okay, so we have 6 storytellers tonight. 4 of them have never told a story before, which I love. And I love to know what makes a person send that email that says, I think I have a story, but I'm not sure about it. And so working with these people for the past few weeks is such a tremendous honor. And I can tell you that I've lost some sleep in beautiful ways because of some of the spirits and the connections and the otherworldliness of what's going on here. Whether or not you're a believer in ghosts per se, I think you'll walk away tonight having to at least question. And I just ask you to listen with an open mind and an open heart and a curious heart. These stories are true according to these storytellers, and that's all I need to know. And so there'll be lots of extra leaning in, and I can't wait for them to just come out here. So I'm gonna stop talking. Let me make sure I'm getting all of my things in. That's really what I want to say. Just stay wide open and send the love up on the stage. We've been telling our new storytellers there is no greater audience than a Hoot and Holler audience. Who's a first timer? Who has never been to Hoot before? All right, awesome. Well, welcome. This is a great one to initiate yourself in. But there's truly nothing like our audiences, nothing. We feel the love, and so just keep it hurling at us at all times up here. That being said, our first storyteller is a first-time storyteller. She has spent her adult life writing alongside teenagers, whether as a workshop leader, high school English teacher, or essay coach. She lives in the Grandin area with her husband, 3 children, 2 dogs, and a fish named Michael Jordan. You can read her irreverent and intermittent updates at kategivens.substack.com. Please welcome, lean it in, give the love, Kate Givens.
I grew up in a ghost-positive environment. Okay, I remember being really little and having a nightmare and going to my mom for comfort. Mom, are monsters real? No, honey. Are vampires real? No, honey. Are ghosts real? Well, yes. Growing up, there were strange patterns and events in our house all the time. We had footfall on stairs, creaks on the floors, but not that different from any house from the 1920s. But then, in our entry hall closet, the left hand of every glove would go missing, and we wouldn't notice until it snowed. My room was a nanny's quarters at one point, and it had a little kitchenette in it with a little fridge and a little stove and a little sink. And if you went over to the kitchen at night, there were these distinct hot and cold spots, and there were no vents or windows or fans anywhere nearby. And my mom waved it all away. Yes, there's a ghost in the house. We all have to get used to it. So we did. So my sisters and I assumed the ghost lived in the fridge in my room, so we named him Cold Toes. And every time there was an unexplained noise or something fell off the walls, we would all say, "Oh, Cold Toes." But one night, I was in bed, and I woke up with this overwhelming feeling of being in someone's presence. And that presence got closer and closer until something or someone was sitting at the edge of my bed, but there was nothing there. I was terrified. I couldn't move. And the next day, when I told my mom, she acted like I was making a big deal out of nothing. Yes, Kate, it's a ghost. I've been dealing with this my whole life. This was an undisputed fact. That's me. Was an undisputed fact. Just like there was a ghost in our house was a fact, the fact that my mom, a mother of 3, homemaker, mall walker, was a beacon for paranormal activity was just the way things were. She has so many stories about ghosts she's encountered over the years, of people who passed away months, years ago, and she gets to come and say goodbye to them. She can't wear a watch. They don't keep time on her arms, no matter the brand or type. She's the kind of person that strangers walk up to and tell their entire life story to. I'm also that kind of person. I use that gift to help teenagers unlock their truest stories. My mom uses it for gossip. When I tell you all that my mom has been dealing with these encounters her entire life, that's not untrue for me either. Although they've never really felt scary, maybe unsettling at times, and they've never happened with the frequency or the intensity of my mom's stories. I think, like a lot of adults, I spend a good amount of time trying to untangle my identity from my parents. If my mom hadn't been so certain, would I have even noticed the things around me? My mom grew up in Blooming Rose, West Virginia, which she will proudly tell you won the Charleston Gazette's Best Town Name in West Virginia award. It's in the heart of coal country. It's just a little town on the side of a mountain, and even today, going there is like taking a step back in time. There's the mountain, there's one main road, there's the river, and across the river is where everybody lives. You have to cross a bridge to get to where everybody lives. And when my mom was growing up, that bridge would frequently wash out, and people would be stranded at home for weeks at a time. There's this story that the next door neighbor's grandmother died in the dead of winter while the bridge was out, and the funeral home couldn't come and get her. So they set her out on the back porch in the snow in sunglasses and a fur coat, so not to scare anyone. Is that story true? I don't know, I wasn't there. But my mom told it to me, and then at my grandfather's funeral, at least a dozen other people told it. And then my mom told me, do not tell that story to anyone because it makes us sound trashy. Which makes me certain something about it is true. Also, I need you guys to promise not to tell my mom that I'm telling you all of this. That goes for you too, PBS. I do spend a lot of time trying to find the truth in my mom's stories. They can be outlandish. She's often a misunderstood hero. She's the only person with common sense in the entire world. She has a tendency to embellish. To be honest, sometimes it drives me crazy. But here's a story that I think is true, because every time she tells it to us, she tells it exactly the same way. This is the story of my mom's ghost. Okay, so my mom is younger. She's 8 or 9. She's in bed with her dog, Missy, a wire-haired fox terrier who would sleep in bed with her every night. Missy jumps out of bed and starts barking at the bottom of the stairs. They live in this older house, and her room is a sunken bedroom, kind of like this. So you walk in the doors, and then you walk down the stairs, and you're in the main part of the room. So Missy's at the bottom of the stairs. She's barking. My mom grabs the dog, puts her back in bed with her. Dog jumps out of bed, starts whining. My mom picks up the dog, puts her out of the room. That dog never sleeps in that room ever again. The next night, my mom wakes up, and she has the feeling that someone is watching. She sits up, she looks around the room, and she sees him, the form of a man standing in the shadows at the bottom of the stairs. The ceiling coming down the stairs is so sloped, and the man is so tall, he has to turn his head to the side to fit. And he's just standing there in a stiff uniform, just staring. Doesn't move, doesn't talk, just stares. He comes back every night. My mom is terrified. She doesn't know what to do. He never does anything. He just stares. She doesn't want to tell anybody, though, because she says she's afraid if she told, he might disappear forever. She can't quite see his face, but she feels he's sad. One night, she hears a creak. She looks over to where the tall man stands, and he takes a step forward toward her. He straightens out his head to show his full height. She says, "Don't do that." He takes a step back, goes back to the bottom of the stairs, and stands there staring. Sometime later, her family is cleaning out a closet in the house, and a picture falls. My mom says it was probably wedged between the shelf and the wall. Nobody knows where it came from or who the picture is of. They think maybe it was there before they moved in. But in the picture is a man with dark, sunken eyes, wearing a Civil War uniform. He's seated, but you can tell just how tall he is. My mom says, "That's him. That's the man who comes to my room at night." "Well, what happened?" I ask. My mom says, "Well, it was a nice picture, so they hung it up in the dining room." Is that the end of the tall man saga? No. It would be a pretty good ending, though, wouldn't it? He kept coming. My mom said over time he came less and less, or maybe she ignored him more and more. Eventually, she moved out of the house, out of West Virginia, to other places more or less haunted. My daughter is 9 years old, and she saw a ghost in our house in Raleigh Court. I've never seen or heard anything, but when she asked me, "Mom, are ghosts real?" I said, "Well, yes."
I've been an avid fisherman ever since I was a young boy. My mother, she taught me. It was her favorite pastime, and she passed it on to me. And I loved it, and I still love it above all other hobbies. But with that kind of passion, though, we can get blinded by it. We can be lured and manipulated, just like a fish, by unexpected anythings, right? And we can just as easily be manipulated by forces, malevolent forces, or unexplained forces. Forces that would prey upon your favorite delight and turn that into your greatest weakness. And I think that's what happened to this young angler who may have been turned into the angler of prey in North Carolina at the banks of this creek, the Black Lagoon. This is North Carolina, my mom and me. At this point, my dad had been dead for 5 years. I'm 8. And she's very, very clandestine about things. I'm her only son. I'm her only boy. And so she's very private about fishing, especially when we fish with the tree branch, all Huckleberry Finn style. And she had to be, but we caught a lot of fish that way. We had to, as we were so poor, we fished to live, but it was fun. This one time, she let me go out by myself to the Black Lagoon, this creek, not too far from the farmhouse. It's actually walking distance. So 8 years old, grab my backpack, I grab my tackle, and I'm on my way. I'm out there. And I just had this strange feeling. I wanted to go fishing so bad. I felt like it was calling me. So it's really strange because I never liked this creek in the first place. See, it was over a road bridge, and they had this oily green topwater that didn't go anywhere, just stagnant. And under the bridge, it was dark water. Now, we could never catch fish that we could keep in that orange, oily water. And matter of fact, one day, we caught a brim, and it was undead, if you will. Like, we caught it, and it died as soon as it left the water. Because, like the glazed over eye when a fish is dead. Not both eyes, but just one. Again, undead. Couldn't keep that thing. Gross. But on the other side of the road bridge is black, dark water. And it flowed away from the orange, stagnant water. Really weird. And again, strangely, I wanted to fish there. So bad. So bad. Not long before this, me and my mom there. And I was fishing, and then something grabbed my line and just slowly pulled me into the water. Just Real slow. Not the violent, abrupt nature of catching a really big fish, splashing. Just a slow, long tug of war that I was definitely losing. My mom at the top of the bridge, she's like, let go. And I'm like, no. Finally, the pole snaps, and it enters the water, just as calm as could be. No motion, no commotion, nothing you can really speak of. Just, it was gone. And here I am, one desperately to fish at this creek again. And so, here I am, catching fish, put them in my bucket. And then it gets really eerily dark. And I remember there's like a storm coming, but there's no wind, there's no rain, it's just dark. So fishing is in my blood. I don't want to leave. So I just pack my stuff up and I just move further down the creek. Because the fish, well, they stop biting. And again, this is 1988. You got to realize that at this point, I moved down a creek. I'm probably on someone's land fishing. So you got to be very quiet. You be very quiet. And as quiet as I was, it still wasn't enough. So here I am on this creek. And all of a sudden, I don't hear the road bridge anymore. I don't hear road traffic, the birds, the squirrels rustling. I don't even hear the water flowing anymore. My heart starts like pounding. My chest starts to hurt. I don't know what's going on. I'm like kind of feeling I just don't know what's going on. So I kind of sit down, I pull in my line, and then as I turn, boom, there he is, the tall man. And I mean, I startle back, and I fall down, and I hit my head on a log and hit my head and neck. But that doesn't bother me because I realize I'm out here alone fishing, and I just got caught. My mom is nowhere to protect me. This tall man just staring there. The fall that I took, he didn't even startle him. He just kind of watched me there as if he'd been watching me fish up until this point. And then I gathered myself, and I think he's coming towards me. At least I think, because I can't register him walking. See, I don't see his legs move. And there's a hill, so he should kind of, but he doesn't. I can't tell. He's just kind of floating towards me. Next thing you know, he's right there in front of me, like in my face. What you doing down here, boy, he says. And I can't talk. I can't move my body. My mind won't do anything. I try to be polite. I try to say something. Nothing will come out. And all of a sudden I say, I'm sorry, sir. My mom let me. He stops me. He says, I don't see your daddy anywhere. And your mama, well, she ain't around. And you out here alone. Fisher of men, he says. Messing with the smell of worms and dirt, he says. And I really don't know what to say at that point. Would you? I'm 8 years old. This guy said I smell like worms and dirt. But he leans in, still looming over me, just hovering. It's his presence. And I can smell this chewing tobacco and like the cinders of like an old smoked out campfire. And he leans in as if he wants to give me a secret. Next thing I can smell the chew and the spittle rain on my face. And he leans in and he says, "You gonna run, boy." What? He says it again. "You gonna run, boy." He screams it at me. "You gonna run, boy." And absolutely, boom, I'm gone. I'm running. Absolutely, I'm running. I'm trying to head back to that road bridge. I'm like, nope, But then I can still hear him saying those words, "You gonna run, boy." But it's not getting further away. I'm running. I can still hear it like it was right there in front of me. But I look back and he's not there. I'm booking it. I am taking off. And I can still smell the cinders. I can still smell the tobacco. But then I'm running for long, and I think road bridge should be right there. I shouldn't be that far down. There's no way I can be lost. I mean, I don't hear him saying, "You're going to run, boy," anymore. So I should be in the clear. I should be safe, but I don't see the road bridge. But what I do see is a figure standing out off the tree line, and he's standing there. I'm still running. And he's got a pitchfork on his shoulder. I remember this. And I didn't know if it was a tall man or not. Was it going to stop? No. I keep running. I'm just running. And finally, I see my backpack. I see my fishing gear. Not where I left it. Not where I left it. At the road bridge. Now, I packed up. And I'm like, what the heck? The bucket of fish is kicked over. They're all slimy and rotten. They're just dilapidated. They're just, rotten. One of them's got a bite out of it. Remember, just right out of it. It's got a bite out of it. I don't know. Spoiled. I pick up my backpack, and I run up the hill towards the road bridge, going back home. And I happen to look back just one last time to see the tall man float walking up the bank. And he stands on the shoulder of the road. And now I can hear everything again. It was like the silence, but I can hear everything again. He says, "I know your daddy. He's not going to be happy with you. You're going to run to your mama, aren't you?" Light shines from behind me on a road, and I can visibly see the tall man. And he's got long black boots, this rust-colored duster, these overalls that are burgundy and kind of just pork pie hat, flat brim right across his face. And then I look back, and it's a truck. It's my mom's beat-up puke green Chevrolet. And I'm like, "Mom!" But I look back, and he's not there. And she's screaming at me, "Get in the truck!" But I'm already in the back of the cab. I'm in that thing. I'm looking through the glass, looking to see if I can see a tall man, but I don't smell any cigarette smoke or the chaw, the cinders, none of that. Just the smoke and exhaust from this truck. And my mom knows I've been crying. She didn't really say anything else. And she just turns around, truck goes back, drives us home. I mean, I got a scolding when I got home for not being right by the road bridge, for staying out too late. But I never did go back down to that creek, the Black Lagoon. As you can see. I love fishing. But I think that time I met some unexplainable force, an entity, a demon, if you will, maybe the devil himself, down at the Black Lagoon.
Woo, 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 woo! Yes!
I am not an expert on the supernatural. I know very little about ghosts. I was an English teacher for a long time, and what I love is story, and genre in particular. So when you study genre, one of the things that you learn is that there are drivers to it. And so with the stories of horror, the driver is this anticipation as you approach this inevitable end that we all know is coming, but we're all going, yes, 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 let it happen. And then at the heart of it, though, what really makes a story horror isn't violence. It's isolation and powerlessness and hopelessness. Haunting stories in particular. I spent my earliest years in a garden apartment in Chicago, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a basement apartment where your windows are exactly the right height to watch people walk by. And I really liked it. I remember being surrounded by the friendly sounds of our upstairs neighbors, this older couple who would be talking at all times of night and day. You'd hear them scooting furniture, walking around. It was great when I was small. As my older brother and I got bigger, my parents started to complain, felt like we were a little too cramped, and said, "We need to move." And just before I was 7, they said, "We have bought our first house." It was weird, y'all. When you look at it, it's basically a giant brown brick shoebox. All the windows are shoved to one side, The front and back door were on the sides of the house, but kind of at an angle, so you weren't sure where you were supposed to go in. And even weirder, the center inside the house was bisected by this giant stairway that went from the attic to the first floor to the basement. Now, I liked the basement. I grew up in one. And the front part of the basement was nice and big and open and great, but the further back you got, the more maze-like and the more of a warren it became as walls twisted around on each other. It became smaller and more cramped. There was this tiny crawl space my brother wanted me to go through all the time because it was a zigzagging path to the backyard, but it was also filled with spiders and cobwebs and not great. The first floor, nice. Back part of the house, behind the stairs, you got your bedrooms, the one I shared with my brother, my parents, a little kitchen, laundry. And the front was the area that we shall not enter. It was the wonderful shared space, living room, dining room, pulled together with 1980s tuxedo blue plush carpet. And that carpet flowed from the front side door, not to be confused with the back side door, front side door, through the living room and kitchen, up the stairs to the attic. I did not like the attic. The attic bugged me. And my parents loved the attic. The house had been newly renovated right before we moved in, and the second floor in the attic was basically brand new. It was unfinished wood from front to back. Nothing really disturbed it. They thought it was great for storage, but it was uncomfortable up there. It was always hot, and it smelled bad, like this cloying, horrible, acrid, almost bitter smell, like cigarette smoke. So largely I tried to avoid it. Weird stuff happened with that attic. The first thing was the door to the attic was a solid wood core door, the kind that you'd put on the outside of the house, but somebody put it up on the attic. And we would just find it open. We wouldn't hear it drift, we wouldn't hear it creak. It was just closed, and then you'd turn around, and it was open. And what let us know it was open was the heat would start to creep down from the attic. And that smell of acrid cigarette smoke would come with it. And you almost couldn't get me to go up there because every time we did, that smell would get on our clothes and it would follow us out. It was nasty. I hated the smell less than I hated late nights. Because in the middle of the night, remember, I grew up in a basement. I know what upstairs neighbors sound like. And we would hear slow, laborious footsteps moving from one end of the attic to the other. It would scare me so bad that at 7, I'd dash out of my bed, run to my parents and theirs and say, "There's somebody upstairs." And they said, "It's just your imagination. Nobody can live in the attic." I suppose they were right. The sounds kind of got worse the longer that we stayed there. By the middle of summer, not only did we hear footsteps in the middle of the night, my mom had put a rocking chair up there, and we would hear it going back and forth and back and forth. And we would run to our parents who were not in that space, and we would say, "Hey, you're not in the attic, we're not in the attic. What gives?" And they'd say, "It's a house settling. It's what new houses do." The worst night, I woke up to the sounds of those footsteps. And I'd been convinced it was just me. And my brother in the bed opposite was standing on his bed, head tilted, and listening. And I could see him in the streetlight, following like I was. And I said, "Sean, what are you doing?" And he looked at me and he said, "Nothing." And he fell from standing to full flat, slammed into the bed, and pulled the covers over his head. And if you can think of anything more terrifying to a 7-year-old boy, oh, that attic. As school got closer, we forgot a little bit about it. We got distracted. We started making friends in the neighborhood, going to school and just being tired at the end of the day, so that when we did hear those sounds, they didn't keep us awake quite as much. My brother even made a friend with a kid named Mike, who lived just around the corner from us, and I didn't know Mike very well. Partly he was a little bit older than me, and partly he refused to come to our house. He said it scared him, that there had been a big fire there before we moved in, and that the old lady who lived there had fallen asleep while smoking a cigarette. I don't think at 7 I knew what he was saying. But time passed, footsteps moved overhead, and we got towards my favorite holiday of the year, Halloween. Now, Halloween that year was on a Monday, so trick-or-treating was on Sunday, and we were excited for that for 2 reasons. One, my mom, for the first time ever, was going to buy us actual store-bought costumes rather than taking us to the Goodwill and making a, "look what I found." And this is the 80s, so for those of you who don't know, the premium costumes were basically garbage bags tied around the waist like a hospital gown, weird geometric patterns and colors, and then a label, because nobody knew what it was. So I was so happy to get to go trick-or-treating with my brother, who was Boba Fett, and I was a stormtrooper. Our parents were also really excited because this was the first year that we would be trick-or-treating in a neighborhood with houses. And if you didn't know this, when you ring the doorbell of a house on Halloween, people show up. Not so much in neighborhoods of apartments. So they planned to let us go trick-or-treating until the last light on our block went out. They did not plan on 3 inches of snow. But despite the cold and the wet, it didn't slow us down. We went out until that last light went out, and we got all of the candy that was left in that bowl, all 4 pieces, and we were like, yes, Kit Kats. And that night, I slept the sleep of the just. And I only woke up to the footsteps twice. So the next morning, Halloween, I got up early, and I said, I'm going to go get some candy. And it was gone. And I asked my brother, where'd it go? And he said, well, we were brushing our teeth. Mom and Dad put it in the attic. I had 2 thoughts go through my head. 1, do not go up there. And 2, my chocolate will melt. So, wearing my pajamas, bare feet, I climbed out of bed, tiptoed across the freezing linoleum floor, and started climbing on hands and knees up the stairs to the attic. By the time I got to the door, I was trembling. My arms and legs were shaking, and I realized I was afraid. Partly, I was afraid of what would happen if my parents caught me. But more than anything, I was so scared of whatever was behind that door. But chocolate. And so I put my hand on the knob, turned it, and pushed, and took my first steps in. The heat was staggering. It had been cold in the house, and I look to my left, and I see at the very end of the attic, there's the windows, my mom's sewing table, and 2 orange pumpkin buckets of candy. But the smell was worse than I've ever smelled it. It was horrible. It was cloying, and it made my lungs burn, and my eyes hurt. And I said, okay, I'm going to go as quickly as I can. And I started to scurry. And the closer I got, the slower I went. On either side of me were just piles of boxes over my head, and as I got about halfway to the candy, I cleared the last of the boxes, and there was my mom's rocking chair. And in it was something dark and gauzy, slumped over. And I froze. And it sat up. And I saw her. An old woman, burned and charred, her face like melted wax, her eyes blue-white, blind, and the smell that came off of her was overwhelming. I couldn't breathe. And she lifted a hand to me and said, "Take me with you." I screamed. I ran. My foot caught on something. I hit the door. I slammed it closed. I rolled down the stairs, ass over tea kettle, and smacked my head on the floor. And I was in so much trouble. First, I was in trouble for going into the attic. Then I was in trouble for going barefoot. I was in trouble for stepping on a nail. I was in trouble for bleeding on my mother's favorite carpet. And as a punishment, they said, "You are not allowed to go in the attic ever again without shoes." No problem. What was a problem was staying out of the hospital. About 3 weeks later, I came down with a case of croup so bad, I was on oxygen for 3 days. After that, a month later, pneumonia. Again and again and again, bronchitis. Finally, a diagnosis of asthma. And then a warning that I had a general weakening of the lungs. And every time I have an asthma attack, I cannot breathe. And I feel that heat. I feel like I really have taken her with me.
Not everyone gets punched in the face at work by an NFL player, but this girl did. To be fair, it was really dark. The New Orleans Saint didn't know that I was a girl, and I had scared him so badly that he screamed several octaves higher than a castrati from the 16th century. Unfortunately for him, our security snatched him up and dragged him out through a hidden door. If he protested, I couldn't hear over all the other screams. I grabbed a paper towel and shoved it up my bloody nose, wiped out my mask, and crawled back under the swinging bridge to my favorite spot in the swamp room. This was every night of every weekend in October. I was lucky enough to have been sponsored and accepted to work at the infamous House of Shock in New Orleans, founded by Pantera and Friends. We were given as much crappy pizza and as much alcohol as we could drink for the favor of working in the scariest haunted attraction in the United States. We had specific cast that worked the lines and worked the parking lots. The lines people waited hours back and forth in front of local metal stage bands that played and the Atone Pain Tribe. They were a body modification group, and they had various shock methods like hooking their members through the shoulders with giant meat hooks, and then they would swing them over the crowd, blood dripping, moaning the whole time. It wasn't a prop, it was real. If we didn't have someone vomit or piss themselves every night, we had failed our audience. The House of Shock holds some of my fondest memories. And the sound of chainsaws to this day makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. But how did I end up in this torrid love affair with the seedy city of New Orleans? That's the real story. So what happened was we were visiting friends in Birmingham, Alabama, and one of our dear friends had moved to New Orleans, and she invited us to come down for a long weekend. It's a free place to stay. I like New Orleans. So I packed up my toddler, and I told Sherry and my other friend, Carol Ann, that we were going to go for 3 days. We were just going for a long weekend. That's it. So we did. While we were there, we decided we would go sightseeing. And they followed in the car behind me. I'm driving down St. Charles Avenue, and the thought occurred to me, Anne Rice wrote the book The Witching Hour about that house in the Garden District. I should take a left. So I whipped into the streetcar lane and on a hunch took a left and drove down a couple of blocks, pulled over, and figured I would tell the car behind me what we were doing. As I get out, I ask the people walking down the sidewalk, hey, do you know where that house is? And they're like, yep, it's right there. You stopped right in front of it across the street. Well, that was fortuitous. So I tell Carol Ann, I said, hey, I think that house, and right about that time, this limo pulls up and stops in front of the house. There it is. That's the limo. And I was like, that's interesting. And as we're standing there, none other than the Gothic queen of New Orleans herself, Miss Anne Rice, steps out of the limo onto the sidewalk. Evidently, it was her personal residence. I did not know this. So I'm looking at the limo, and I'm like, I'm not going to bother her. Yeah, I am. I am going to bother her. So I moseyed through the crowd with my toddler on my hip because I thought she would get a kick out of knowing that I named my son Julian after a character in her book, Julian Mayfair from The Witching Hour. And so I walked up and I was like, excuse me, Miss Rice, I don't mean to bother you, but I really wanted you to meet my son Julian, named for Julian Mayfair. Her face lit up with delight. She shook his plump little hand, and she explained that she was late for a meeting, but wanted to know if we would be interested in coming in to see her dolls. Why, yes, we would. She's like, how many people are with you? And I'm like, this us. We picked up a few going in. As we're walking in, security went into panic mode. She's bringing people in the house? The mansion was magnificent. There's a massive staircase on the left. We walk in and there's this gorgeous parlor with these heavy velvet drapes. There's a coffin in the middle of the parlor, of course. She explained that that was so she could give a proper entrance when she did public appearances. Makes sense? She had a new book coming out, violin, and she said, in fact, I'm doing a book signing next week. If you're going to be here, you guys should come to that. Why, yes, we will. We will come to that. We will. We follow her down the hall like smitten little ninth graders, and we walk into this back room. It was actually a dining room. There's a big table. Her dolls, Lestat, Louis, and Claudia, that she had commissioned, prototypes, were on the dining room table. Everybody's sitting there like waiting for her. She introduces us to her team, and then she gets down and she looks at my son, eye level, and she goes, "This is the room where your character was born." My little goth girl heart melted. She was such a gracious soul. Then she asked if we would be interested before we left in having a tour of the property. Why, yes. Yes, we would. Duh. And so security took us around all of the grounds, all the porches, took us out to the tree where Lasher would appear to Rowan in the books. We were elated to get such special access. Needless to say, we extended our stay. The following week, we went to the book signing. We got there early so we could get a good spot to watch her entrance. Yep, that's the book signing. As we get there and we're standing there waiting with all the other book nerds, security carries in the coffin from the parlor somberly, and they bring it in and they set it out, and then they lift her out like she's a little living dead doll. She was dressed all in black and white lace. I mean, it was the 90s. She spent way too much time talking to us. She was genuinely happy that we came. She autographed all of our books. And as we're chatting, she said, "Do you like the violin?" Not her book, but the music. And I was like, "Absolutely, it's my favorite instrument." She's like, "Oh, that's great. If you guys are still going to be here," she said, "I'm actually flying in Layla Josefowitz from California, and we're going to have a private violin concert in the Garden District. She's going to perform all of the pieces from my new book. Would you be interested in attending?" Why, yes. Yes, I would. I didn't even look at my friends at this point, Needless to say, we extended our stay again. At the violin concert held in this really swanky Garden District church, I fit in there. We didn't know anybody other than Anne and her crew. We had obviously become pretty friendly with them by this point. The violinist played with such passion that her neck had this big red bruise on the side at the end of it, which I thought was completely appropriate given the circumstances. My little Juju was on his best behavior and wore a little suit. He looked so cute. And Miss Rice stopped for pictures with us and to chat with us before we left. She happened to mention that she was getting ready for the Memnock Ball. What's that? That was her annual Halloween party that she had. Oh, you don't say. She's like, if you guys are still going to be here, I can get you tickets if you would like to come. Why, yes. We absolutely would. I'm not going to New Orleans and be invited to Anne Rice's Halloween party and not go. I can stay another week. We extended our stay. Now, keep in mind, this whole time we had been exploring the city. We had been learning the history, taking the tours, eating crawfish. I mean, by this point, Carol Ann had her own damn apartment. I'm not even kidding. 3 weeks, she's like, I'm in. We figured that, this was a grand adventure, and we were in all the way, some of us more reluctantly than others, Sherry. But we were going to see it to the end. We all got different period costumes and painted our skin white. I got Julian a little Mozart costume. He had a little powdered wig and knickers. He was so cute. And we took off to Anne Rice's Halloween party. It was at Tipitina's Warehouse. Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails was there. A bunch of other bands played. Some guy with a blue mohawk carried around a little baby coffin he had picked up from a Metairie cemetery. I didn't ask. There was a little person dressed as a vampire who bit a friend of mine on the knee. I didn't ask then either. Miss Rice took the stage around 2 a.m. to close out the night. People took that costume contest way seriously, just so you know. And she announced the winners. We were absolutely flabbergasted when Julian won first place in the Halloween costume. Yes, he was front page of the Times-Picayune entertainment section that Sunday. We did not extend our stay. We finally went home. However, we were back next October in time. We finally moved to New Orleans, and we attended her Halloween party every year for I don't know how many years, many, many years. I also volunteered at the House of Shock for several years after that. We moved back to Virginia around the time that Hurricane Katrina hit, and the House of Shock closed in 2017. Miss Rice passed in 2021. The Vampire Chronicles and The Witching Hour are both series on AMC now, on whatever channel that is. And you can still go to her Halloween party. It's now a VIP vampire weekend. If you can get tickets, good luck. I have stayed in Virginia and tried to settle down as much as I could. But if you ask me if I am interested in attending a spooky haunted house, or if I would like to get into any wicked Halloween mischief, I will always answer, yes, yes I would.
I grew up in a family of storytellers. My daddy, he's the biggest one. He caught me in a lot of my troublemaking growing up. And as he'd say, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Both my mom and daddy are from Greenbrier County, West Virginia, and have told tales of spirits and haunts over the years. Mama always told us, it's not the dead that you need to be afraid of. One story that stuck with me was the one where ghosts helped convict her murderer. My mama, she was a respected family historian. Along with her cousin Trish, she collected court records, pictures, marriage certificates, birth certificates, death certificates, and trials over the years. And my daddy, he's just ornery and talks to everybody. I'm going to tell you all the same ghost story as it was told to me. Elva Zona Heister Shue. People called her Zona. Well, she lived down near Lewisburg in West Virginia. She lived with her mama, Mary Jane. Zona was in her early 20s, and she was a beautiful girl. Had long dark hair, but she had a year-old baby born out of wedlock. Don't quite know what happened to that baby. Now remember, this was the 1800s, so it was scandalous for that time. Anyway, in 1896, she came across good-looking, strong Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue, but y'all can call him Trout. Trout was in his 30s. He had just moved to Greenbrier County, and he had started making really good money as a blacksmith. They instantly took a shine to one another, and they started courting. Now, Mary Jane, that was Zona's mama, she didn't care for Trout. He'd been in jail. He'd been married several times before. He'd abandoned his children. But within a few months, Zona and Trout got married. About a year goes by, around January. Trout sent 11-year-old Anderson Jones, he was a young boy that worked for him, to run up to his house to check on his wife. When he opened the door, Zona was found at the bottom of the stairs, still not moving. Sorry. Well, Anderson, he hauled ass to his house. He had to tell his mama what he'd done seeing. By the time the police and the local doctor, Doc Knapp, they showed up, well, Trout was already there. He was carrying Zona's lifeless body up the staircase. Trout, he dressed Zona up in a stiff collared dress. He was crying, he was just acting a damn fool. And he wouldn't let anyone get near Zona's body. Doc first said that she had died from everlasting faint. But that was soon quickly changed to childbirth. But then Doc noticed that she had a bruise on the right side of her cheek and on her neck. Zona's poor mama, well, she was just plumb beside herself. And Trout was acting wild at the funeral. One minute he was bawling, next he was sweating. He never leaving Zona's coffin. He had placed a pillow in the coffin, one side of her head. On the other side, he had rolled up a cloth, laid it on the other side, and he wouldn't let anybody near the body. Now, people were whispering, and they noticed that she had a scarf around her neck, and when Trout was asked about it, he just said it was her favorite scarf. Now, during this time, you've got to understand, people in the community, they took responsibility for washing the body, dressing the body. So this was really out of character that he had taken it upon himself. So people were already gossiping in a small town. Mary Jane, she just knew in her heart that Trout had killed her daughter. She started praying day and night for God, give her the name of the person who killed Zona. A few weeks later, she started having visions. She would have Zona come to her in her dreams 4 nights in a row. And it was the same every night. And she would tell her mama how she died. And it made Mary Jane feel faint and sick. Trout was a son of a bitch. She was cruel. On the last day of Zona's life, Trout beat her, and he broke her neck just because she didn't have meat to cook for dinner that night. He didn't just choke her, he smashed her windpipe. On that last night that Zona came to visit her mom in spirit form, as she slowly turned away, she noticed the break in her neck. Well, that's when Mary Jane decided to go see the prosecutor, and his name was Mr. Preston. Now, Mr. Preston, as I'm sure you would think, did not automatically jump on this. But his heart really broke for Mary Jane. She was a pillar of the community, and he did some digging around town, asking different neighbors what their thoughts were. And he found out that Doc Knapp wasn't even allowed to examine the body before she was put into the ground. And they all shared the same story of those 4 nights that she came and visited her mama in spirit form. Now, about a month after she died, they dug Zona's body up out of that cold, hard ground. Trout, Doc Knapp, prosecutor and Anderson, the little boy that found her body, and a handful of neighbors, they were all there. I don't know if you've ever been to West Virginia in the wintertime, but it's a bitter, different kind of cold. So her body was in really good shape. Now Doc started cutting into her body and checking her stomach to see if she'd been poisoned, looking for signs of trauma, and he worked his way up to her head. Well, by that point, Trout was shaking like a dog shitting razor blades. Doc suddenly turned to Mr. Preston. They whispered for a few minutes to one another. Then Mr. Preston, he looked over at Shu and said, "Boy, Sona's neck's broke." My dad then decides to show me an actual newspaper clipping from the Pocahontas Times. It's a local newspaper in Greenbrier, Pocahontas County. And it stated, on the throat were the marks of fingers indicating she had been choking, that the neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebra. The ligaments were torn and ruptured, and the windpipe had been crushed at the point in front of the neck. Trout was immediately arrested. When the case went to trial, Zona had many naysayers. Some people were giving her down the road, didn't believe a ghost was coming to her, especially her dead daughter. But Mary Jane stood up for herself. She was a good, God-fearing woman, pillar in the community. And Zona coming to her those 4 nights in a row wasn't just a dream. The jury took less than an hour to come back with a guilty verdict. Trout was sentenced to life in prison. Soon after, a mob of folks got together and they tried to lynch Trout. But unfortunately, deputies stepped in and stopped that. But Trout ended up in West Virginia State Prison, where sickness took him out of this life in March of 1900. There's currently a marker erected that you can see by the state of West Virginia near Zona's grave, and it says, "The only known case in which testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer." Thank you.
To quote my favorite song from Beetlejuice the Musical, "From the cradle to cremation, death just needs a little conversation. I have mastered the art of tearing convention apart." Now this, my friends, is a concept I live by. I am a certified death care practitioner. I am a death midwife and mortician intern. I find beauty in death that most people don't. Yeah. Being in the presence of the dead and dying is truly an honor. It is such a sacred task to care for them. Discussing death and mortality with people can get pretty interesting results. Letting people know that it's okay to decay and opening the minds of others really is something I find rewarding. My goal in life is to break down the walls of conventional views, bringing family and love back into death care practices. And ever since I was young, I have been obsessed and curious about death. I saw my first dead body when I was 6. I remember that day so vividly. I came home to see my dad sitting on the couch, mouth open, from a heart attack. My 6-year-old self didn't really understand what had happened. My mom was too in shock to stop me from walking up to him, touching him. I thought he was asleep. I didn't know why Mom was crying, and she told me, "He's dead, honey." I remember reaching out to him, touching his cold blue tongue, something you normally wouldn't be able to do to somebody that was alive. And that's when it finally cemented in my head that he was gone. He wasn't waking up. I remember the black-suited men that came and took my dad away on a stretcher, putting a white sheet over him. And I remember worrying when they put the sheet over his face that he wouldn't be able to breathe under there, and the kind undertaker uncovered his face for me before they took him out the front door. Mortician, undertaker, one who undertakes the sacred job of preparing the dead. This job requires not only a reverence for the dead, but for the living they leave behind. Throughout history, this job was done by women called layers out of the dead. Layers out also performed skilled jobs that would later fall to undertakers. Watchers were women that stood vigil over the bodies as they were passing. This job later became known as death doula or death midwife. A death midwife guides the dying and their families through the dying process and beyond, just as a birth midwife guides a mother and their families through the birthing process and beyond. Years before I started my training and education in the death care, I had an experience that stuck with me and inspired me to embark on this path. I started working for a company that assisted the elderly, sick, and dying, and their families at home. On my very first day of work, I was sent to help a family tend to their dying loved one, matron, as she was sent from hospital to die in the comfort of her own home. She was deeply loved and surrounded by family, but she was unresponsive and in the active stages of dying. I felt helpless and surrounded by grieving strangers. I felt helpless not for myself, but for her family. And then her daughter started to become alarmed because her mother's temperature began to spike. Without a second thought, I immediately started taking action. Something in me activated, and I became a different person. Checking her temperature and pulse, I realized that the entire room was focused on me. I took in a deep breath and reassured everyone that this was part of the dying process, that the body loses the ability to regulate temperature as it dies, but we can make her more comfortable by giving her a cool sponge bath. The turning point for me was when her son looked at me and said, "We are here to help. Please, tell us what to do. You're the professional." And ancient knowledge must have kicked in, because I summoned all of my courage and all of my strength, and I started giving out instructions. I helped them gently wash her and with cool wet rags, and slowly something began to happen. They began talking to her, brushing her hair back from her face and wiping her forehead. Tears streamed down the daughter's face as she gazed down at her dying mother with such adoration. She whispered comforting things to her, like how much everyone loved her and how beautiful she was. I still don't know how I held it all together that day. The atmosphere in the house was less like a funeral and more like a family reunion. It was breathtaking to witness. The experience was an incredible inspiration and plunged me into beginning my education and training in the death industry. I became a certified death midwife, and later I figured I could do more good by becoming a full-fledged mortician. Now that I've worked with the dead and have had the privilege to serve families and their loved ones that last bit of kindness, I often feel as though I knew the deceased in life when I look at the person's face. Even though they were complete strangers to me, I get a sense of familiarity that doesn't happen with the living, just the dead. I feel their personalities fully when I'm around them. As I tend to their bodies and their families, I really see them as human beings deserving of kindness and care. Could it be that I sense their presence? Maybe. I'm not religious by any means, but I believe there could be spirits and supernatural things that can't be explained. I tend to connect with the dead. That much I know is true. I don't fear being around them or find them creepy or weird. In fact, I find death to be beautiful in its own right. But even with that viewpoint, I thought I was going crazy. I asked my boss if feeling familiarity and connection with the dead was something a normal mortician feels. He looked at me like I grew a second head. But he said I was very empathetic and that I should distance myself from my work. And I even went as far as asking my psychiatrist about it, thinking that I had some kind of new mental disorder. Even with that, over the next few months, I experienced so much while working at the funeral home. I don't have the time here to do every story justice. There was a woman that came in that wasn't found for almost a month, and her skin was shades of blue and green, and I held her hand, her frail, translucent hand, and I found her to be beautiful. I felt a connection and responsibility to provide her with that same love and kindness and care, no matter the state of her body. I found it calming to take my breaks in the quiet of the parlor, where we often had prepped, cosmetized, and casketed bodies awaiting their big day. It was never creepy or scary. I often felt surrounded by the presence of the person. Like one woman had her casket topped with a quilt she'd sewn herself, and the flowers sitting next to her she'd grown in her garden. I could feel her surround me like a grandmother giving me a comforting hug. I could be here all night telling you about the various experiences I've had meeting these people in death. But the truth is, guys, I'm here to turn the death industry on its head. I'm not here to sell you a $10,000 casket. I'm not here to upsell you fancy things for your funeral. Even though I love lavish Victorian funerals, and if that's the way you want to go, hey, I'm all here for it, because that's how I want to go. But I'm here to bring death positivity to the masses, to break down the walls of convention and open the minds and hearts of many. My goal is to increase awareness, to help us all make the most of our lives, and to help us face our own mortality with a new sense of appreciation and understanding. I'm a certified death midwife, and I'm studying to be a mortician, and I'm a revolutionary, like my Undertaker ancestors before me.
Yes! Christina Gravely, y'all. I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day, when I saw the hearse rolling for to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Undertaker, 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 please drive slow, for that body you're hauling. How I hate to see her go. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day, when I saw the hearse rolling for to carry my mother away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Undertaker, 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 please drive slow, for that body you're hauling. How I hate to see her go. Oh, the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by. There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. In the sky, Lord, in the sky.
Woo! Yes! Laurel Hells Ramblers, y'all! Okay, somehow we're at the end of the night. I know I'm not going to sleep. I haven't anyway for like weeks because I've been living with these beautiful stories. Thank you all so much for coming up and hanging in with us. We can feel it up here. I just can't even express the way it feels. The synergy and the magic, it's so beautiful. Can't stop, won't stop. Every time I throw out a theme, I never know how it's going to sort of come together. And there's always kind of morphs and different ways that it changes and people drop out or whatever it is. But I always know that on the night, it's going to turn out exactly the way it's supposed to. And this night is exactly an example of that, right? I love meeting these people. I love living with their ghosts. I welcome their ghosts in and we work closely together, and these guys work so hard. And so I'm going to bring them back out, but first, real quick, I want to thank the Grandin. I want to thank Sam, always. Blue Ridge PBS Echo, please throw them some love, any contributions that you can. We got to keep them alive. Of course, the Grandin, Corey Greer, my family who, I go missing for at least 2 weeks before every show. I'm gone. Like, they can't find me. I'm living with ghosts now this time. We do have a show coming up in Bristol on November 16th at the Bristol Country Music Museum, which is going to be so beautiful. So if you feel like taking a southbound road trip, soundtrack of my life, it's going to be gorgeous. And then I made Ian mark down February 8th for us back here. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Maybe a little twisted Valentine thing. I'm not sure yet. But we'll be back here February 8th. Keep an eye on the page. Please come and tell a story. And please let's welcome the band back out here and these beautiful 6 storytellers for their well-deserved standing ovation for being so brave and showing us the beauty of the ghost. Christina, Kate, Donnie, Marge, Alicia, Seth. Look at these gorgeous people. They're going to be out there selling their CDs and T-shirts. Go say hey. You knew them when, for reals, rock stars. Again, we love y'all so much. This show sold out 6 weeks in advance. That is you. Thank you. We love all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for leaning in. We feel the love. Come tell a story. Keep talking to each other. We're going to heal the world with stories. We are. Love you.